Hello, my name is Josh. I'm on the product team at Skuid. In this video, we will see an example of how to change what data a model condition filters out. That change will be based on the choices of the user at runtime. Let's start by taking a look of an example of what we are going to build in this video. Model conditions limit the data returned to a model from a database. They act like a way to filter out data you don't want to get to the data you do want. So for example, if we're looking at a page like this, we have two different tables that are right now connected to the account object in the Salesforce database. Since we're in a Salesforce dev org, there are about 12 account records helpfully provided by Salesforce. So in this case, there aren't a lot of accounts that we need to look at, but what if we didn't just want to have a long list of all the account records based from the accounts object? What if we wanted a model condition to filter out records we don't want to see? Well, that's where model conditions come in. They act to filter that out. Sometimes we know ahead of time what we want the model condition to act on, meaning that maybe we only wanted to see account records where the industry field had a value of energy, and that was it. In that case, we can set up a model condition that has that value predefined and it always acts on that field value. But what if we wanted to be able to change which data is being displayed by the model, is being returned by the model? What if we wanted the user to be able to click on something and it would change which records were shown in there? Well, we need a way to pass in values into model conditions, and that's what we're going to look at in this video. Let's start by creating a page. Create one here, and I'm going to give it a unique name, descriptive name that describes what it is. So we're going to have account lists, and we're going to have a dynamic condition. Dynamic in the sense that it doesn't have a predefined value, we'll be passing things into it. Now, if you're new to Skuid, and you haven't seen the composer before, which is where we build our page, this top part is called the palette. On the left, we have different things like our components and our models list. We don't have any models yet, so that's empty. This is the elements pane. And on the right, we have what's called the properties pane. Anything that I select, its properties will be available over there. And down here is the canvas, which is where we'll be dragging and dropping our components. And again, as I click on things, the properties pane changes what's being displayed based on the items I select. Let's get started by building a model. So I'll click the Models tab and the Elements pane, then I'll go to the Add Model button. Now I have an empty model, and I should give it a helpful name so we know what it does. In this case, it's going to be Accounts Not Filtered. There's no spaces in the model ID name because components will be working with that, and spaces would break that. So we don't put any spaces in here. Since we're working in Salesforce dev org, we already have the data source set up, but I need to tell this model which object in the Salesforce database it's going to look at. So in this case, I'm going to choose account, and I'm going to do something that is breaking with best practice. Normally, we don't recommend removing the record limit, meaning that now this model will get all the records from the object. Again, since we're playing with a safe and small data set, it's only going to return about 12 records, so that's no big deal at all. But we don't necessarily need to be pulling down hundreds or thousands of records if we're in some kind of production org or site. So this is just for experimentation purposes. So click Save. I've configured my basic properties for the model. But now I need to tell Skuid which fields I want Skuid to get off of each, for each record. Skuid does not assume you want all the fields on a record, since there are often dozens and dozens of fields on these records and objects. So Skuid makes you choose which fields you want. In this case, I'm only going to select 4. One account ID, account name, account type, and industry. Click Save, and over here I see my list of fields that I've added, just 4 fields in this case. So I've got a model, it's going to go get all the records of the account object, and it will return 4 different fields on each of those records. But I don't have a way to display that data yet. I need to add a data component. So I'll click the Components tab, and I can scroll down to find the table, or I can use a search. Once I have the table in my sights, I click and drag it down into the canvas. Now I have a table for my page that will display all the records in my model. But I need to configure this a little bit more first before we preview what we've done. I'm going to give this table a title. Call this Accounts Not Filtered. I'm going to change one other property on this component. I'm going to click Display. And I'm also going to break with best practice. So by default, the table will show you 10 rows, meaning that there may be more records in the model, but there will be 10 rows displayed at first by the table component. And then you can paginate through to see all the other records in the model. In this case, since there's hardly any data in the object, I'm going to change this to Show All. That way we see all the records that the model has fetched from the accounts object. So I have that configured. So right now, I have an empty table because I haven't told it which fields I want this table to display. Just like with models, Skuid does not assume which fields you want to see on records. So for the table, I need to click on Add Fields, click on Model Fields, and I get an Add Fields modal. And here I can check the boxes next to the fields I want to see. Once I click Apply, those fields are added to the component. So I'll click Save, and I'm going to preview this to see what it will look like. So we have our data component. It's got all the records that are in the model, and the model went and got all the records out of the account object. In this case, there are 13 records in my account object in my Salesforce dev org. So this list is not filtered, but we're here to learn about what it looks like when you do use a model condition. And again, with this model condition, we don't know ahead of time which records we want it to filter out. We want the model condition to filter out. We want to let the user decide. It's going to be user's choice in this case. Let's go back to the composer. And here we're going to add another model and a table to show the data in that model. And this model that we're going to add is going to have, you guessed it, a model condition. So let's start by going over to Models. And let's click on the model we've already created. And we're going to clone this model because the model that we want to build a condition on is very similar to the model we have already constructed. And I just remembered something I wanted to show you because it'll make it easier for us to compare things when we look at our final preview. So before you clone it, let's add one other property here. Fields to order records by. As you might just guess from that property label, this is where we can determine how the records are sorted by the model. So I'm going to tell this property that I want you to sort on the industry field in ascending order. If this looks a little funny, you can go to the help text and it will give you a little explainer for how you can structure this if you want to change it. So it's either ASC for ascending or DESC for descending. I like to have my data sorted. Maybe that's weird. So now I want to clone this model now that I have it exactly the way I want it. Okay, so now I have 2 exact copies. Well, almost. They have a slightly different model ID. Now I need to change this so it looks a lot different. So I like to make unique and descriptive model IDs. So now this is more descriptive than it was before. Now when I look at this model name, I know, oh, okay, it's a model showing accounts filtered. So we can leave the Salesforce object as it is and this max number of records blank. And we're going to sort these as well. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And just to double check, under Fields, I have the 4 fields I added to the previous model. So we've already done a lot of work for ourselves. Now let's work on making this model special. Let's click on Conditions. and click on the Add New Condition icon. Make sure the new empty condition is selected. And here's where we're going to do the work of configuring our new condition. Conditions act on fields, so I need to select a field for this condition to act on. I'm going to click the field picker icon, and in this select fields modal, I'm going to scroll down till I find industry, or I could have just used the search instead of all that scrolling. So now this model condition will act on the industry field. So it's starting to build a sentence over here to describe the records it's going to return. I count records where industry is the value of, in this case, because we don't have a predetermined value we want it to act on, we're going to leave this blank. But before we move on, we're going to change the content, and this means the content of the fields that it's acting on. So we can work with single specified values, multiple values, fields from another model, which is really helpful if you're doing cross-object functionality, and things based on who the user is, maybe their profile or other user metadata might be useful. None, result of subquery. There's a lot of different options for how to configure a model condition to filter out data. In this case, we're going to choose multiple specified values because we're going to give the user the option of passing in multiple values into this model condition. And again, we're going to leave this blank because we don't know what the user is going to select. The next part of a condition, we've done field, operator, we've done value, but we need to change the state. By default, conditions are always on, meaning that no matter what the model does, when it's queried, what actions it takes, the model condition is always applied. We don't want that in this case. We want to be able to turn this model condition on and off as needed. So we're going to choose filterable defaults off. What that means is filterable means that filters can manipulate it, and we're actually going to add a filter to do the manipulation. But it also means that things like actions, if you're using the action framework, a very, very powerful feature of Skuid, actions can also manipulate conditions. So think of this as a way to toggle model conditions on and off. And as you might guess from default off, that means that when the model first loads, it's not going to apply this model condition, but then later an action or a filter can turn this model condition on and off as needed. Just like with pages, models, we're also going to give this a descriptive name, and we can call this condition 01 industry. And we'll save it. And now we've kind of built a sentence over here that describes what data is going to be returned by this model, applying this model condition. So it's going to return account records where the industry is the value of whatever the user chooses. And this condition, named condition 01 underscore industry, can be modified by filters and the action framework, but it is off by default. Great, so we've got a condition. It's off by default. It's going to accept whatever values the user selects, but right now we don't have a way for a user to tell the model condition what to do. We've got the one table that shows the unfiltered list of account records. Let's create another table that will allow us to add a table filter. So just as we cloned our model, let's clone our table to save us some work. So now I've got two tables, and I'm going to scroll to the top of the canvas. I'm going to choose this top table to be the one that will show the filtered data. So I'm going to change the title because that title is no longer accurate. And most importantly, I need to change the model and change it to accounts filtered, because this table will faithfully display data in the model that it's connected to. So if I left it as accounts not filtered, any filter that we added to here would do nothing because the model didn't have a model condition for the filter to manipulate. So now I've got the model selected, I've got my title. Because we cloned it, it already has fields in it. Great. Now I'm going to show you a preview, and it's not going to work quite the way we want it to yet. So we added that model condition, and we know that it's on this table, accounts filtered. But right now, we still have the exact same set of records as we do for the table connected to the model that does not have a model conditions. They both have 13 records. we have not yet created a way for a user to tell this table, therefore this model condition, therefore the model, which data we want out of that object. So let's make that happen. I'm gonna go back to the composer, and I'm gonna make sure I'm on the accounts filtered table, and I don't need to expand the palette. What I need to do instead is click on Add Features and click on Add Table Filter. Now there's a button here that's gonna act as my filter. And this filter allows us to choose which records are being displayed by the table. There's a lot of different options for configuring a filter. Filters can be based on a single item that a user selects out of a pick list or types in. There's multi-select, which is what we're gonna do, and things like acting on date ranges, numeric ranges, or just a simple toggle that turns a model condition on or off based on whether or not the user clicks on it. But we're gonna choose multi-select option because we set up our model condition to accept multiple values. So we'll need a filter type that allows for the passing in of multiple values. Multi-select option is our filter type. The next important part we need to configure is this: pick options and conditions. Right now it's set for automatically, where Skuid will create the list of options that the user can select from and can build a condition for some types of filters, but we're gonna do the work ourselves. So we're gonna switch this to manually, which means now I have to tell it which options we want to offer the user, and we also have to tell this filter which conditions we want this filter to act on. So I'm gonna select, I'm gonna go to this property, which is model condition to effect, and choose the model condition that we had just created. So now this filter will act on that model condition. Before we add our pick options, let's change a few other properties here. And we can change the way that this button looks with these properties. So right now it's not going to show a label above the filter, but maybe I want to give a helpful label to describe the behavior of the filter so the user knows what to do. So I'm going to choose yes, use custom label, and then I'm going to give this filter a label. In this case, maybe we want to call it filter by industry. Multi-select. You don't have to be this verbose. It can be a lot simpler if you want it to be. And none selected. We can have text on the filter. In this case, I'm going to type in show all records because this will describe when no option has been selected. Now the user knows when they look at that button that it's showing all records. So I've got my main property set up. I've told this filter which condition I want it to manipulate, but I still have to choose the options I'm going to present to the user for them to select. That's where we're going to go back to the condition here, and I'm going to click on this stack of pancakes, which allows us to add our options. Click on the new option source, and again, with Skuid, there's often multiple places where you can add, or there's multiple ways for you to do things. And I can manually add in all the options I want the user to see. I can give the user a list of options based on rows in another model or records in another model. But in this case, I'm gonna use the pick list options for conditions field. What that means is that Skuid will look at the industry field and it will show a list of all the industry field values in this option list. So let Skuid do some of the hard work for me in this case. Okay, I think I've got everything ready. We've got two models, one with a condition, and that condition is empty, so we can pass values into it. I have two tables. One is connected to the unfiltered model. The other one is connected to the model with a condition. And we built our filter here. Let's see if everything works. So I can go back to the preview I've already got, and I can refresh this page. Let's see if it works the way we want it to. Okay, so now I have a filter button that's appeared, and I see that everything looks pretty much the same as we saw before, 13 records under each. So now this model condition that we created was filterable default off, which means that right now it's not on. And as we talked about, by manipulating buttons with actions or filters, we can turn that model condition on and we can pass in values to it. So let's do that. I'm gonna click this drop down and let's start by just passing in one value. And maybe I wanna see the account records with the industry field value of energy. Check that box, click apply, and I've got 3 records now displayed here. And I can verify that that's an accurate count by looking down at the unfiltered, and I see that there are 3 account records with the field value of energy. And since it's multi-select, we can pass in multiple values. So maybe I want to choose biotechnology as well. So now I've got 2 items selected, click apply, and now the records that have either biotechnology or energy are being displayed. Great, and so I can go back in and turn it off if I want to, which is us toggling off that model condition, and it goes right back to displaying the full list of records. Great, so we really wanted to show you an example of how to use model conditions that don't have a predefined value that allow users to choose which values are passed into that model condition. This is just one example of how actions a user takes can determine what data a model condition filters out and can allow the user to control what data they get to see. Thanks for watching.